I never expected to die on a Tuesday. The night shift at Sacred Heart Hospital had been brutal. 3 stabbings, 2 overdoses, and a heart attack that we barely pulled back from the edge. My scrubs were stained with more blood than I cared to think about. And my feet act in that deep, bone-tired way that only 12 hours of running between trauma bays can produce. All I wanted was to get home, peel off these clothes, and collapse into bed. The parking garage was nearly empty at 3 o'clock in the morning. Most of the day staff wouldn't arrive for another few hours, and the skeleton crew working overnight had already claimed the spots closest to the entrance. I'd parked on the 4th level, as usual, in the back corner where the flickering fluorescent lights barely reached. It wasn't the safest choice, but after 6 years of night shifts, I'd grown complacent. I should have known better. The sound of footsteps echoed behind me when I was halfway to my car. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets. I quickened my pace. Keys already between my fingers like my father had taught me all those years ago. But before I could even think about running, a hand grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. There were 3 of them. Clear's throat, the one in front wore an expensive suit that looked wrong on him, like a snake trying to wear human skin. His eyes were cold, calculating, and when he smiled, my blood ran ice. "Penelope Matthews," he said, and it wasn't a question. "You've been a very difficult woman to find." "I don't know you," I managed to say, even though my voice shook. "You've got the wrong person." Clear's throat, "Oh, I don't think so." He pulled out a photograph, faded, creased from being carried too long. My father stared back at me from the image, younger than I remembered him, standing next to a man I'd only seen once in my life. "Your daddy owed us something. Time to collect." I tried to scream, but one of the others clamped a meaty hand over my mouth. They dragged me backward away from my car toward the service elevator that maintenance used. Panic flooded through me as I thrashed against their grip, my nursing bag falling to the concrete with a crash that echoed through the empty garage. The man in the suit pulled out a knife. "Nothing personal, sweetheart," he said. "But your father made promises he couldn't keep, and in our world, debts pass down through generations." The blade caught the overhead light, and I knew I was looking at my death. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I stomped hard on the instep of the man holding me, used my elbow to drive into his ribs with every ounce of strength I had left. He loosened his grip just enough for me to break free. I ran, not toward my car, but toward the stairwell. If I could just reach the street level, someone might see, might help, might call the police. I made it exactly 15 steps before they caught me. The knife went in between my ribs, a white-hot explosion of pain that stole my breath. I fell to my knees, hand pressed against my side, feeling the warmth of blood seeping between my fingers. Another blow landed across my face, and the world tilted sideways. I hit the ground hard, tasting copper and concrete. Through the haze of pain, I heard them arguing. "She's still breathing. Finish it. Too risky. Someone might come. She'll bleed out anyway. What if she talks? Look at her. She won't last long enough to talk to anyone." Clear's throat, their footsteps retreated, but I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. Couldn't do anything but lie there on the cold garage floor, watching my own blood pool around me. My phone had fallen from my pocket, screen cracked, but still glowing. With trembling fingers, I managed to unlock it. 9-1, Clear's throat, 1. My vision blurred. The number swam on the screen. I could barely feel my fingers anymore, but I managed to press send before the darkness took me. I don't remember the ambulance. Don't remember being loaded onto a gurney or rushed into the same trauma bay where I'd worked just hours before. My colleagues later told me I'd gone into cardiac arrest twice on the way to surgery. That they'd called my emergency contact when they thought I wouldn't make it. The emergency contact I'd forgotten I even had. Preston Blackwood received the call at 4:17 in the morning. I wouldn't learn until later what that phone call meant to him. Wouldn't understand the chaos I'd unknowingly dropped into his meticulously controlled world. All I knew when I finally opened my eyes 36 hours later was that the man sitting beside my hospital bed wasn't someone I expected to see. He was tall, powerfully built, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. All hard angles and cold eyes that had seen too much darkness. A scar ran along his left jawline, a thin white line that spoke of old violence. When those eyes met mine, I saw something flicker in their depths. Surprise, recognition. Something else I couldn't quite name. "Miss Matthews," he said, and his voice was like gravel wrapped in silk. "You've caused quite a commotion." I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. He seemed to notice because he reached for the water pitcher on my bedside table and poured a cup, holding the straw to my lips with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. "Who are you?" I finally managed to ask. "Preston Blackwood." He set the cup down, settling back into his chair with the casual ease of someone who owned every room he entered. "Apparently, I'm your emergency contact." "That's not possible. I don't know you." And yet, here we are. His gaze traveled to the monitors beside my bed, the 4 lines running into my arm, the surgical dressings wrapped around my torso. The doctors say you're lucky to be alive. The knife missed your lung by centime. You lost 3 pints of blood. I didn't feel lucky. I felt confused and terrified and angry all at once. Why would I have you listed as my emergency contact? I've never even met you. Something shifted in his expression. A crack in that granite exterior. That's what I'd like to know. But I think I have an idea. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. Your father was Thomas Matthews. My heart rate spiked, setting off a warning beep on the monitor. Preston's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. I see you remember him, he said quietly. He died 5 years ago. My voice came out flat, emotionless. I'd worked hard to build that wall, to separate myself from everything my father had been. We weren't close. No, I imagine you weren't. Preston studied me with an intensity that made me want to shrink back into the hospital pillows. Your father worked for me, Penelope. Or rather, he worked for my mentor, Victor Kane. Clears throat. When Victor died, your father made choices, bad ones. But he was loyal once, and Victor cared about him like a brother. The pieces started falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they formed. You're a criminal, I said. I prefer businessman, but yes, if we're being honest. He didn't flinch from the accusation. And your father put my private number in your phone as an emergency contact because he knew that if anything ever happened to you, I would have the resources to find out why. He had no right. He had every right. He was your father, and he was trying to protect you the only way he knew how. Preston stood, moving to the window where dawn light was beginning to filter through the blinds. The question now is why someone tried to kill you. Because I don't believe in coincidences, and I don't believe this was a random attack. Fear crept back in cold and paralyzing. They knew my name. They showed me a picture of my father. They said he owed them something. Preston's entire body went still. The kind of stillness that predators have right before they strike. When he turned back to face me, his eyes were chips of black ice. Describe them. I did. Every detail I could remember through the haze of pain and terror. The expensive suit that didn't fit right. The knife. The casual way they discussed leaving me to die. When I finished, Preston pulled out his phone and made a call. Marcus, I need you to pull surveillance footage from Sacred Heart Hospital parking garage between 2:30 and 3:30 this morning. Send it to my private server. He paused, listening. No, this isn't a request. He ended the call without another word. Who were they? I asked. I don't know yet, but I will. He moved back to his chair and for the first time I saw something almost human in his expression. Concern. Anger on someone else's behalf. You're not safe here, Penelope. Whoever sent those men will try again once they realize you survived. The police can't protect you from people like this. I can. He leaned forward again. Clears throat. I have a secure location. Medical staff on call. Everything you need to recover. And I'll find the people who did this. Why would you help me? Because of some loyalty to my dead father. Because Victor Kane asked me to look after his people's families if anything ever happened to them. Your father was one of his people. That makes you under my protection whether you want it or not. His jaw tightened. And because no one attacks someone under my protection and lives, clears throat, to talk about it, I should have said no. Should have told him to leave. Should have called the real police and put my faith in the system. But I'd seen the coldness in those men's eyes. Heard the casual way they'd planned my death. The system hadn't saved me. A random emergency contact I didn't even remember entering had. How long? I asked. Until it's safe. Until they're dealt with. He stood buttoning his suit jacket. A doctor will be by to assess if you're stable enough for transport. My people will handle the logistics. You won't need to worry about anything. As he reached the door, I found my voice again. Mr. Blackwood, he paused, looking back over his shoulder. Thank you for coming, for not leaving me alone. Something flickered across his face again. That same gentleness I'd seen when he held the water cup. Get some rest, Penelope. You're going to need your strength for what comes next. The door closed behind him. And I was alone with the beeping monitors and the growing realization that my life had just changed in ways I couldn't begin to understand. Somewhere out there, people wanted me dead for sins my father had committed. And the only person standing between me and them was a man who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling me under despite my racing thoughts. But just before sleep claimed me, I remembered something my father had told me once years ago before everything fell apart. If you're ever in real trouble, Penny, the kind that normal people can't fix, there's a number in your phone. Don't call it unless you have no other choice. But if you do, he'll come. Clears throat. Preston Blackwood always keeps his word. I'd thought it was the ramblings of a sick man, guilt eating away at him in his final days. I'd forgotten about it completely, buried it along with all the other painful memories of who my father had been. Now that forgotten number had saved my life, and I had a feeling it was going to cost me everything. Preston's secure location turned out to be a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of a building in the Gold Coast. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, but I noticed they were all bulletproof. The glass had that slight distortion that reinforced security panels created. The decor was minimalist, expensive, and cold. Marble floors, leather furniture, artwork that probably cost more than my entire nursing school education. Everything was white, black, or chrome without a single personal touch to suggest anyone actually lived here. It felt exactly like a fortress pretending to be a home. The transport from the hospital had been seamless and unsettling. A private ambulance, 2 EMTs who moved with military precision, and a convoy of black SUVs that screamed organized crime to anyone paying attention. The hospital staff had asked no questions, simply processed my discharge papers with unusual speed. Money and influence, I realized Preston Blackwood had both in abundance. Now I lay in a bedroom suite that was larger than my entire apartment, hooked up to an 4-pole and surrounded by medical equipment that belonged in a hospital, not a private residence. A nurse named Sarah, professional, efficient, and clearly accustomed to not asking questions, checked my vitals every 4 hours. A physical therapist came twice daily to help me move without tearing my stitches. Everything I needed appeared before I could ask for it. I was a prisoner in a gilded cage. Preston himself was a ghost. I'd catch glimpses of him in the hallway, hear his voice in other rooms as he conducted business over the phone. But he never entered my room, never checked on me directly. For 3 days, the man who'd claimed to be protecting me remained conspicuously absent. On the 4th day, I'd had enough. I disconnected my fork carefully, using the nursing skills I'd spent years developing, and made my slow, painful way out of the bedroom. The penthouse was larger than I'd realized, a maze of corridors and rooms that all seemed to flow into each other. I followed the sound of voices to an office with double doors, both slightly ajar. "Don't care what Romano thinks." Preston's voice cut through the air like a blade. "He doesn't move product through my territory without my approval." End of discussion. "He's going to push back," another man replied. "You know how he is about respect. Then he can learn what happens when you disrespect me." I pushed the door open wider. The conversation stopped instantly. Preston sat behind a massive desk, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. 3 other men stood around the office, all large, all armed if the subtle bulges under their jackets were any indication. Clear's throat, they turned to stare at me with expressions ranging from surprise to hostility. Preston's face betrayed nothing. "Gentlemen, give us the room. Boss, we're in the middle of out." They left without another word, though I felt their eyes on me as they passed. The last one closed the doors behind him, and suddenly I was alone with Preston Blackwood in his inner sanctum. "You should be resting," he said, standing and moving around the desk. "Dr. Chen said you're not supposed to be walking around yet. Dr. Chen isn't keeping me prisoner." I leaned against the door frame, trying not to show how much the short walk had exhausted me. "You are. I'm keeping you alive. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, this feels an awful lot like a very expensive jail cell." Something almost like amusement flickered in his eyes. "If I wanted to imprison you, Penelope, you wouldn't have the strength to walk out of that bedroom, let alone interrupt my business meeting." "Then what do you call this?" "I have no phone, no way to contact anyone, no idea what's happening with my life. My job probably thinks I'm dead. My landlord is probably packing up my apartment." Clear's throat, "I'm completely cut off from everything." Preston moved closer and I fought the urge to back away. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled even as it terrified. "Your supervisor at the hospital received a call explaining that you were involved in an incident and need extended medical leave," he said calmly. "Your rent is being paid. Your belongings are safe. Your job will be waiting when you're ready to return. I've handled everything, without asking me. You were unconscious for the first 36 hours and barely coherent for the next 48. There wasn't time for consultation." He had a point, but I refused to concede it. "And the people who attacked me, have you handled them, too?" Preston's expression darkened. "I'm working on it. The surveillance footage was corrupted professionally, which tells me they had inside help at the hospital. But I have other ways of finding information. It's only a matter of time. Time I'm spending locked in your tower like some fairy tale princess. Would you prefer I send you home? Let them finish what they started." His voice remained level, but there was an edge to it now. "Because make no mistake, Penelope, they will try again. The moment you step outside my protection, you're dead." The bluntness of it hit like a physical blow. I wanted to argue to insist he was being dramatic, but I'd seen the coldness in those men's eyes. Felt the knife slide between my ribs. Heard them discuss, leaving me to bleed out like it was nothing more than taking out the trash. "I hate this," I said quietly. I know. Preston's voice softened slightly. But it's necessary just until I can identify who ordered the hit and why. Clear's throat. You keep saying hit like I'm part of your world. I'm a nurse. I spend my days helping people, not. I gestured vaguely at his office, the symbols of his power. Whatever this is, your father was part of this world. That makes you part of it whether you want to be or not. My father was a weak man who made terrible choices. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I was too tired and too angry to soften them. He chose crime over his family. He chose loyalty to criminals over his own daughter. I spent my entire adult life trying to be the opposite of everything he was. Preston studied me with that unsettling intensity. He talked about you, near the end when things got bad. He'd have these moments of clarity where he'd remember he had a daughter who became a nurse. He was proud of you. He had a funny way of showing it. He knew he couldn't be part of your life. Knew that his world would taint everything you'd built. So, he stayed away. Preston moved to the windows, hands clasped behind his back, but he still tried to protect you the only way he could, by making sure that if anything happened, I would know. I would come. I wanted to be angry at my father for that presumption, for reaching beyond the grave to drag me into his mess, but I was too exhausted. I need air, I said. Real air, not whatever filtered ventilation system you have in this place. I need to see the sun. Feel the wind. Preston was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. The terrace. There's a private outdoor space accessible only from this floor. No sniper angles, no easy access points. You can go there whenever you want. It was a concession and we both knew it. Thank you. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Penelope. I looked back. I meant what I said at the hospital. No one touches someone under my protection. Clear's throat. I will find the people who did this and I will end them. That's not a threat. It's a promise. There was something absolute in his tone. A certainty that should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of security. Whatever else Preston Blackwood was, he was a man who kept his word. Over the following days, I fell into a routine. Mornings spent with Sarah checking my vitals and changing my dressings. Physical therapy sessions that left me sweating and exhausted. Afternoons on the terrace, watching the city move below while I remained suspended above it. Evenings alone in my room reading medical journals that someone had thoughtfully provided, trying to maintain some connection to my real life, and increasingly time spent with Preston. It started small. He joined me on the terrace in the evenings, sitting in silence while we watched the sunset over the lake. He never pushed conversation, never asked intrusive questions, just existed in the same space, a silent sentinel guarding against threats I couldn't see. Then one night, I broke the silence. What did my father do specifically? I mean, what was his role in your organization? Preston took a slow sip of the whiskey he'd been nursing. He was an accountant, one of the best. He could make money flow through channels that left no trace, could hide assets where no one would think to look. He made a lot of people very rich, including you, including me. He didn't apologize for it, but more importantly, he made Victor Kane rich, and Victor took care of his people. Your father lived well for a long time until he didn't. Until he made a mistake. Preston's jaw tightened. He got greedy, started skimming off the top. Thought no one would notice. But Victor always noticed. Always. What happened? Victor confronted him. Your father panicked, tried to run, got himself killed in the process. Car accident while fleeing the city. At least that's the official story. I turned to look at him. And the unofficial story. Preston met my gaze steadily. Victor had him killed. Quick, clean, made to look like an accident. Because your father betrayed him, and in this world, betrayal has only one punishment. I should have been horrified. Should have been disgusted. But I'd known deep down that my father's death wasn't the accident the police had reported. Knowing the truth, awful as it was, felt almost like a relief. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. And because understanding your father's choices might help you understand why someone would come after you now, 5 years later. You think this is connected to what he stole? I think it's the only thing that makes sense. Preston leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your father embezzled nearly $10 million before Victor discovered what he was doing. Most of it was never recovered. When he died, people assumed the money died with him. But if someone thinks you know where it is, I don't. The words came out sharp, panicked. I haven't spoken to my father in years. If he hid money somewhere, I have no idea where. I believe you, but whoever sent those men might not. The implications settled over me like a weight. So, I'm going to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder because of money I never knew existed and don't know how to find. Not if I find them first. There was that absolute certainty again, that quiet promise of violence. I've been reviewing Victor's old files, looking at everyone who was close to your father. Someone knows something. Someone gave the order. When I find them, this ends. And then what? I go back to my life and pretend none of this happened. Preston was quiet for a long moment. If that's what you want. Something in his tone made me look at him more closely. In the dying light, his features had softened slightly, the hard edges not quite as sharp. For the first time, I saw him not as the terrifying crime lord, but as just a man, a complicated, dangerous man, but still just a man. What do you want? I asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. Want? You've upended your life to protect someone you don't know. For a promise made to a dead man about another dead man. There has to be something in this for you beyond obligation. He stood, moving to the terrace railing, looking out over the glittering city lights. Victor Kane saved my life when I was 17 years old. Found me running with a street gang, heading toward a dead end. He saw something in me, gave me opportunities, taught me how to survive, and then how to thrive in this world. Everything I am, everything I have, I owe to him. He was a criminal. He was also the closest thing to a father I ever had. Preston's voice roughened slightly. When he died, I inherited his empire and all the responsibilities that came with it. One of those responsibilities was looking after the families of his men. Your father was one of his men once. That makes you family whether by blood or by oath, and I take care of family. There was something achingly lonely in the way he said it. This man who commanded fear and respect, who had more power and money than most people could imagine, was ultimately alone, surrounded by employees and associates, but no real connections, no family of his own. I'm sorry, I said softly. About Victor, about losing someone who mattered to you. Preston looked at me, surprise flickering across his features. Most people would say I got what I deserved. That anyone who lives this life should expect to lose everyone they care about. Most people haven't watched someone they love die. I have. My mother's face flashed through my mind. Cancer, wasting away despite everything the doctors tried. Loss is loss. Pain is pain. It doesn't matter if the person was a saint or a criminal. Grief is grief. Something shifted in the air between us. A recognition perhaps. Two people who'd been marked by loss, who'd built walls to protect themselves from feeling too much. Preston moved back toward the seating area, but this time he sat closer, not inappropriately so, but near enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the expensive cologne that clung to his clothes. Tell me about nursing, he said. Why that choice? The question surprised me. Because I wanted to help people. Sounds naive, I know, but it's not naive. It's rare. He tilted his head slightly. Most people talk about helping others. Few actually do it, especially when it requires the kind of sacrifice that nursing demands. We talked as the stars emerged overhead, about my work at the hospital, about the strange satisfaction of knowing you'd made a difference in someone's worst moment. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, and slowly I began to see past the criminal to the person underneath. When I finally returned to my room that night, exhausted, but somehow lighter than I'd felt in days, I realized something terrifying. I was starting to like Preston Blackwood, not despite who he was, but perhaps because of it. Because he'd shown me glimpses of the man behind the reputation, the person who kept his word and valued loyalty and carried the weight of responsibilities he'd never asked for. It was dangerous, stupid, exactly the kind of connection my father would have warned me against if he were alive. But as I drifted off to sleep in that luxurious prison, I couldn't quite bring myself to care. The breakthrough came on day 12 of my captivity, though I didn't know it at the time. I'd grown stronger, my body healing with the resilience that had carried me through countless night shifts and medical emergencies. The wound in my side still pulled when I moved too quickly, but I could walk the length of the penthouse without getting winded. Sarah had removed the 4 3 days ago, and I'd convinced her to stop the round-clock monitoring. I was a nurse after all. I knew my own body well enough to recognize warning signs. Preston had noticed the change, too. Our evening conversations on the terrace had become routine, something we both looked forward to, even if neither of us admitted it aloud. He'd started sharing more about his work, the legitimate businesses that served as fronts, the complicated web of alliances and rivalries that governed Chicago's underworld. I found myself fascinated despite my better judgment, drawn into a world I'd spent my whole life trying to avoid. But that afternoon, everything changed. I was in the library. Yes, the penthouse had an actual library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with first editions and rare manuscripts when I heard raised voices from Preston's office. The walls were thick, designed for privacy, but anger has a way of carrying through even the best soundproofing. You're absolutely certain? Preston's voice sharp with something I'd never heard before. Not anger. Fear. Pulled the records myself, boss. Everything checks out. Marcus, Preston's head of security, sounded grim. Clears throat, it goes deeper than we thought. Way deeper. I shouldn't have eavesdropped, should have returned to my room, maintained the illusion of ignorance. But this was about me, about the people who'd tried to kill me. I had a right to know. I moved closer to the office door. How many? Preston asked. At least 6 that we can confirm. Maybe more. They've been careful covering their tracks, but once we knew what to look for. Marcus' voice dropped lower, and I had to strain to hear. They're all Victor's old lieutenants. The ones who weren't happy when you took over. A long pause. Then Preston, quiet and deadly. This isn't about territory or power. This is about the money. Your father's money. I pushed the door open, not bothering to hide the fact that I'd been listening. Both men spun toward me. Marcus. Hand went to his waistband where his gun was holstered, I assumed, but Preston held up a hand, stopping him. How long have you been standing there? Preston asked. Long enough. I moved into the office, ignoring Marcus's hostile glare. You found something about who attacked me? Preston's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. After a moment, he nodded to Marcus. Show her. Marcus clearly didn't like the idea, but he pulled out a tablet and pulled up a series of photographs and documents. He set it on Preston's desk, and I moved closer to look. The first image was surveillance footage. Grainy, taken from an odd angle, but clear enough. The man from the parking garage, the one in the expensive suit that didn't fit right. He stood outside a restaurant I didn't recognize, talking to 2 other men. His name is Vincent Corelli, Preston said, coming to stand beside me. Low-level enforcer, mostly muscle for hire. He's worked for half the families in Chicago at one point or another. You found him. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by a darker satisfaction. Clears throat, good. I wanted him caught. Wanted him to pay for what he'd done. We found him yesterday. By the time my people got to his apartment, he was dead. Single gunshot to the head. Professional execution. Someone cleaned up their loose ends. The relief curdled into something else. Not disappointment exactly, but a sense that justice had been stolen from me. Who killed him? That's what we're trying to determine. Marcus swiped to the next image. A financial document, rows of numbers that meant nothing to me. But before he died, Corelli made some interesting purchases. Specifically, he deposited $50,000 in cash into 3 different accounts over the past 2 weeks. Payment for attacking me. Payment for killing you, Preston corrected. Which means someone with significant resources wanted you dead. The question is who and more importantly why. He swiped through more documents, phone records, bank statements, surveillance photos. A pattern emerged. Pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite see. Victor Kane had 12 senior lieutenants when he died, Preston said, his voice taking on a lecturing quality like he was walking me through a complicated diagnosis. When I took over his operations, some of them weren't happy. They thought they had more claim to his empire than some kid he'd taken under his wing. But you consolidated power, I said, remembering things he'd mentioned in our conversations. You proved yourself. I eliminated the competition, Preston said bluntly. Not all of them died. Some retired. Some moved to other cities, started their own operations. But 6 of them stayed in Chicago, accepted positions under my leadership. I thought they'd made peace with the new order. You thought wrong? Marcus interjected. Preston shot him a look, but didn't disagree. It appears that several of Victor's old guard have been planning something. We're not sure what exactly, but your father's missing money keeps coming up in our investigation. But I told you I don't know anything about that money. They don't believe that. Preston pulled up another photo. This one of a meeting. Multiple men seated around a table. I recognized none of them, but Preston pointed to one. Anthony Romano. He was Victor's financial advisor. Worked closely with your father. After Thomas died, Romano was questioned extensively about the missing funds. He claimed ignorance. You think he was lying? I think he's been waiting 5 years for the heat to die down so he could recover what your father stole. Preston's eyes met mine and I saw the full weight of what he was about to say. I think Romano convinced the others that you know where the money is hidden, that you're the key to recovering $10 million that belongs to them. The room felt suddenly too small, the air too thin. How would I know? My father and I barely spoke. I didn't even go to his funeral. They either don't believe that or they don't care. Because here's what we've uncovered. Marcus pulled up a final document, an old email chain dated, clear's throat, from 6 months before my father died. Your father sent you letters, multiple letters to your apartment. According to postal records, you never opened them, but you didn't return them either. I remembered those letters. They'd come regularly for about 2 months. My father's handwriting on the envelopes. I'd thrown the first few away, unopened. Then, feeling guilty despite everything, I'd stored the rest in a box at the back of my closet. I'd never been able to bring myself to read them or throw them away. You think something in those letters contains information about where he hid the money? Or at least Romano thinks so? Preston straightened, moving away from the desk, which means they'll keep coming after you until they either recover those letters or confirm they contain nothing useful. The letters are in my apartment. Just go get them. We tried. Your apartment was broken into 3 days ago. Professionally done. Barely any evidence left behind. The box is gone. My knees felt weak. I'd been so focused on my own recovery. So insulated in Preston's fortress that I'd forgotten the real world was still moving, still threatening. Then it's over, right? They have what they want. They'll leave me alone now. Preston and Marcus exchanged a look. What? I demanded. The letters were gone, Marcus said carefully. But your apartment had been searched thoroughly. They tore apart your mattress, pulled up floorboards, dismantled your furniture. They weren't just looking for letters. They think your father might have hidden something else, Preston added. Money, documents, physical evidence, and now they know you're alive. You're mobile and you're under my protection. Clears throat, which makes this personal, I realized. Between you and them, it was always personal. Preston's voice hardened. The moment they touched someone under my protection, it, Clear's throat, became personal. Now it's just a question of how this ends. I sank into one of the office chairs, trying to process everything. 6 men, all of them dangerous, all of them convinced I held the key to a fortune I'd never wanted or known about. And Preston standing between me and them, Clear's throat, because of a promise to a dead man. Why didn't Romano just ask me before ordering my death? Why not just approach me and ask if my father left anything behind? Because asking requires trust, and in this world, trust is the first thing you lose. Preston moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back in that characteristic pose. And because if you did know something, asking would just warn you, make you harder to control. So their plan was to kill me and then search my belongings at their leisure. Yes. The coldness of it made me shiver. To these men, I wasn't a person. Clear's throat, I was an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved. What happens now? I asked quietly. Preston turned back to face me and I saw something shift in his expression. Determination maybe or resolution. Now I have a conversation with Anthony Romano and his associates. I make it clear that you are permanently off limits and that any further action against you will be considered an act of war. And if they don't listen, then there will be war. He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather rather than orchestrating violence. But I don't think it will come to that. Once I show them what we've uncovered about their conspiracy, once I make it clear that I know exactly who was involved in ordering your death, they'll back down because you'll threaten them. Because I'll show them that continued action against you will cost them everything they've spent 5 years protecting. Preston moved closer, crouching down so we were at eye level. Penelope, I need you to understand something. These men, they're not going to stop because it's the right thing to do. They're going to stop because the alternative is worse. That's how this world works. I met his gaze, saw the brutal honesty there. Your world. Yes, my world. He didn't apologize for it. But it's your world, too. Now, whether you wanted it or not, your father's choices made it your world. The only question is whether you're going to survive it. Something hardened inside me. I'd spent years running from my father's legacy, trying to build something clean and good from the ashes of his choices. But maybe running wasn't enough anymore. Maybe survival required accepting certain harsh truths. What do you need from me? I asked. Preston's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across his features. Nothing. You stay here. You stay safe. And you let me handle this like hell. I stood, ignoring the pull in my healing wound. Those letters were addressed to me. Whatever my father wanted to say, I should have read them years ago. Maybe if I had, none of this would have happened. You can't blame yourself. I don't. I blame him. I blame these men who think they can murder people for money. But I can also recognize that I might have information that could end this. I crossed my arms. So, what do you need from me? Preston studied me for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. A real smile, not the cold calculation I'd seen before. Your father would be proud of you. I doubt that. I don't. He stood. And when he spoke again, his voice was all business. All right. Here's what we're going to do. Marcus, pull together everything we have on Romano and his associates. Financial records, communication logs, surveillance footage. I want a complete picture of their operation. You planning to leverage them? Marcus asked. I'm planning to give them a choice. Stand down and live or push forward and face the consequences. Preston looked at me. And Penelope, I need you to do something difficult. I need you to try to remember anything your father might have said or done in the months before his death. Any unusual behavior, any mentions of plans or preparations, anything that might tell us where he could have hidden $10 million. I wanted to say there was nothing, that my father and I had been strangers by then, but if I was going to be part of this, I had to actually help. He called me, I said slowly, the memory surfacing. About 3 months before he died, I didn't answer. I hadn't answered his calls in over a year, but he left a voicemail. What did it say? I don't remember exactly. Something about wanting to make things right. About having a plan that would take care of me even after he was gone. I frowned, trying to pull the exact words from memory. He said he'd put something aside for me, that when the time came, I'd understand. Preston and Marcus exchanged a significant look. That voicemail, Preston said carefully. Do you still have it? Maybe. I never delete old voicemails. It might still be on my phone. Which was somewhere in this penthouse, I realized. Preston had taken it early on, claiming it was a security risk. Marcus, get her phone now. Minutes later, I was scrolling through years of saved messages, most of them from the hospital with shift changes and emergency calls. Finally, I found it. Dad, dated 3 months before his death. My finger hovered over the play button. I hadn't listened to this message since the day it came in. Had avoided it like everything else connected to my father. Now 5 years later, with 3 people crowded around my phone in a crime lord's office, I was finally going to hear his last words to me. I pressed play, static, then my father's voice. Rough, nervous, not at all like the confident man I remembered from childhood. Penny, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I've screwed up everything between us, but I need you to listen just this once. I've done something. I've made arrangements. There's money, a lot of money, and it's yours. Not mine anymore. Yours. I've hidden it where no one can find it, but you'll know where. Remember that summer at the cabin? Remember what I told you about treasure maps? You'll figure it out when you need to. And Penny, I'm sorry for all of it. You deserved better than me. The message ended. Silence filled the office. The cabin? Preston asked quietly. I nodded, throat tight. His family had a cabin in Wisconsin. We'd go there every summer when I was a kid before everything fell apart. He used to play this game with me, hiding treasure around the property and drawing elaborate maps for me to follow. Do you remember where this cabin is? Not exactly. Somewhere near Lake Geneva. It was sold after my grandmother died, maybe 15 years ago. Marcus was already typing on his tablet. Give me 10 minutes. If there's a property record, I'll find it. Preston pulled out his phone, making a call. Get me everything you can on Thomas Matthews' family. Properties, assets, any holdings that might have transferred after his death. He hung up, turned to me. This might be it. The key to ending this, or it might be nothing, just a guilty father's rambling. Maybe. But either way, we need to check. Preston's expression was intense, focused. If the money is there, we recover it. If it's not, we at least eliminate one possibility. And then what? You give $10 million back to the men who tried to kill me. No. Preston's voice was hard. Then I use the money as leverage. Proof that they've been lying, scheming, planning treason against my organization. The money becomes evidence of their conspiracy and they either fall in line or face the consequences. It was ruthless, calculating, exactly the kind of thinking that had made Preston Blackwood one of the most feared men in Chicago. It was also, I had to admit, brilliant. Found it, Marcus announced. Matthews family cabin, purchased 1982, sold 2010 to a couple from Milwaukee. According to property records, they use it as a vacation rental now, currently unoccupied. Then we go, Preston said immediately. Tonight before Romano realizes we're this close. I raised an eyebrow. I'm coming with you. You're the only one who recognized your father's treasure maps. And besides, he offered me his arm. It's your inheritance. You should be there when we find it. I stared at his outstretched arm, at this man who'd upended my life and protected me and drawn me into his dangerous world. I should have said no. Should have insisted on staying behind where it was safe. Instead, I took his arm. Then, let's go find my father's treasure. We left the city just after midnight in a convoy of 3 vehicles, SUVs with tinted windows and reinforcements. I tried not to think about too hard. Preston sat beside me in the middle vehicle, Marcus driving with 2 other men whose names I hadn't bothered to learn, flanking us front and back. Everyone was armed. Everyone moved with military precision. I felt absurdly out of place in my borrowed clothes and still healing wounds. The drive to Lake Geneva took 2 hours through dark highways and darker back roads. Preston spent most of the journey on his phone, conducting business that sounded both legitimate and decidedly not. I tried not to listen, tried to focus on the task ahead, but his voice kept pulling my attention back. He was different out here, away from his fortress, more alert, more dangerous. The man who'd sat with me on the terrace talking about philosophy and regrets had receded, replaced by the crime lord who'd built an empire through force and fear. You're scared, he said quietly, startling me out of my thoughts. I'm terrified, I admitted. This is insane. Everything about this situation is insane. You can still back out. Stay in the car when we arrive. Let my people handle the search and miss the chance to solve my father's final puzzle? Not likely. I tried to sound braver than I felt. Besides, I've spent 12 days hiding in your penthouse. At least this is action. Clears throat. There's nothing romantic about action in this world, Penelope. Just blood and consequences. I work in a trauma ward. I'm familiar with both. He smiled slightly at that, some of the hardness easing. I suppose you are. The cabin appeared suddenly through the trees. A structure that was bigger than I remembered, but unmistakably the same place. 2 stories of weathered wood and stone. Windows dark, surrounded by tall pines that whispered in the wind. The lake was somewhere beyond, invisible in the darkness, but present in the sound of water lapping against shore. Memories? Preston asked as we approached. Too many. I stared at the cabin, seeing ghosts of summers past. A younger version of myself running through these trees, laughing as my father chased me with his hand-drawn maps. Before I understood what he was, before everything crumbled, we parked 100 yards away, approaching on foot. Marcus sent his people to scout the perimeter while Preston stayed close to me. His presence both protective and possessive. The current owners keep a lockbox with a key under the back deck, Marcus reported. Security system is basic, residential grade. We can bypass it easily. Do it, Preston ordered. But carefully, I don't want the local police involved if we can help it. 10 minutes later, we were inside. The cabin smelled of pine and dust and old memories. The current owners had redecorated. The furniture was different. The walls painted new colors, but the bones of the place remained the same. I moved through rooms I'd once known by heart, disoriented by familiarity and change in equal measure. Where would he hide something? Preston asked, following me into what used to be the living room. I don't know. The game was always different. Sometimes he'd bury things. Sometimes he'd hide them in trees. Sometimes he'd put them in obvious places that everyone would overlook. I touched the stone fireplace, running my fingers over mortar that hadn't changed in decades. He said the best hiding places were the ones that looked like they'd always been there. Marcus and his team began a systematic search, checking for false panels, loose floorboards, hidden compartments. Professional, thorough, and ultimately fruitless. After 90 minutes, they'd found nothing but the accumulated debris of other people's vacations. Maybe it's not here, I said, frustration building. Maybe he was just talking, saying things to make himself feel better about abandoning his family. Or maybe we're looking in the wrong place. Preston pulled out his phone, bringing up photos of my father's letter and the cabin's layout. You said he mentioned treasure maps. Where did you keep those maps when you were kids? The memory surfaced slowly. I had a special box, an old cigar box I'd painted with flowers. I kept all my treasures in it. Shells from the beach, pretty rocks, the maps he'd drawn. Where did you keep the box? In my room. Upstairs. Second door on the left. We took the stairs 2 at a time. Preston's hand on my elbow, steadying me when my healing wound protested the movement. The bedroom was different now. Guest room furniture, neutral colors, no trace of the little girl who'd once slept here dreaming of treasure hunts, but the closet was in the same place. I opened it, half expecting to see my old clothes still hanging there. Instead, neat shelves held spare linens and extra pillows. Nothing unusual, nothing hidden. The floorboards, I said suddenly. There was a loose board in the back corner. I used to hide things there that I didn't want my parents to find. Embarrassing things like diary entries and pictures of boys I liked. Preston moved the shelves aside carefully, then knelt to examine the floor. His fingers found the seam almost immediately, prying up a board that came away with surprising ease. In the hollow beneath lay a waterproof case, sealed and dusty. We stared at it for a long moment, neither of us moving. Could be a bomb, Marcus said from the doorway. Always the practical one. It's not a bomb. I don't know how I knew, but I did. This was my father's legacy, for better or worse. I reached for it. Preston caught my wrist gently. Let me just in case. He lifted the case out, set it on the floor, and carefully opened the latches. Inside was a thick folder of documents, several USB drives, and beneath it all, a letter addressed to me in my father's handwriting. My hands shook as I picked up the envelope. You don't have to read it now, Preston said quietly. Yes, I do. I opened it carefully, unfolding pages that had been waiting 5 years for this moment. Dear Penny, if you're reading this, it means I'm dead and you figured out my final treasure map. I'm both proud and sorry. Proud that you're clever enough to solve the puzzle. Sorry that you had to. I've done terrible things, Penny. Things that would horrify you if you knew the details. I convinced myself for years that I was providing for my family. That the ends justified the means. But the truth is, I was weak and greedy and seduced by a world that promised power and money and respect. I stole from Victor Kane. He would have killed me anyway. I knew too much. Saw too many secrets. But I accelerated the timeline by taking what wasn't mine. Most of that money is in the accounts documented in this folder. I've set up trusts, offshore holdings, investments that will generate income for decades. It's all yours now. But here's what you need to understand. This money is cursed. It comes from pain and violence and exploitation. If you use it, you become part of that legacy. If you give it back to Victor's people, they'll use it to cause more harm. There's no clean choice here. I've also included evidence, documentation of crimes, payoffs, murders, everything I collected as insurance over the years. If the wrong people get this, dozens of powerful men go to prison, including some you might think are legitimate businessmen. If the right people get it, it could bring down entire criminal networks. I don't know what the right thing to do is anymore. I thought I did once, but I was wrong about so many things. So, I'm leaving this choice to you, Penny. You're the only truly good person I've ever known. Whatever you decide, I trust it will be the right thing. I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you deserved. I'm sorry for every time I chose the money over you, the business over family, the easy path over the right one. You were always better than all of this, better than me. I love you. I always loved you, even when I didn't know how to show it. Be safe. Be happy. Be the kind of person I should have been. Dad, tears streamed down my face by the time I finished. Preston's hand found mine, squeezing gently, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. Marcus had been examining the documents during my reading. Boss, you need to see this. We spread the papers across the bed, bank statements, transaction records, emails, photographs. The documentation was meticulous, damning, comprehensive, and it implicated not just Romano and his conspirators, but dozens of others, city officials, police officers, judges, businessmen. The full scope of Victor Kane's empire documented in excruciating detail. This is, Preston's voice trailed off, something like awe in his tone. This is everything. Complete records of Victor's organization going back 20 years. Including you? I asked quietly. He found a section, flipped through pages, then nodded. Including me. Every deal I've made, every person I've paid off, every body I've buried. It's all here. What are you going to do with it? Preston was quiet for a long moment, staring at papers that represented both his rise to power and potential destruction. That depends on you, on me. This is yours, Penelope. Your inheritance, your choice. You could take this to the FBI, watch my entire organization collapse. You'd probably get immunity, witness protection, a new life far away from all of this. He met my eyes and I saw something vulnerable there. I wouldn't blame you if you did. But if you did, the power vacuum would trigger a war. Rival families would move in. Violence would escalate. Innocent people would get caught in the crossfire. Not to mention Romano and his people would come after you even harder because you'd have taken away their last chance at recovering this money. So you're saying I'm trapped? Use this evidence and trigger chaos or destroy it and let criminals stay free. I'm saying there's no clean choice. Your father was right about that. Preston gathered the documents carefully, placing them back in the case. But there is a third option, which is, let me use this as leverage. I confront Romano and his conspirators with proof of their treachery. I offer them a choice. Retire completely, leave Chicago, take whatever clean money they have, and disappear. In exchange, this evidence stays buried. And the money, my supposed inheritance, goes to establishing something legitimate, a foundation perhaps. Medical clinics for underserved communities. Scholarships for nursing students, something that does actual good in the world. He looked at me carefully. It won't wash the blood off, but it might help balance the scales. It wasn't justice. Not really. The guilty would walk away. The crimes would go unpunished, and Preston's empire would continue. But it was a way forward that didn't require more death, more violence, more pain. What happens to you? I asked. If this information exists, you're vulnerable. Someone else could find it. Use it against you, then I'll have to be more careful. A slight smile and perhaps consider whether this life is really worth protecting. There was something unspoken in those words, a suggestion of possibility I wasn't quite ready to examine. I need time to think, I said. Of course, we'll secure the evidence, get you back, too. A sound from downstairs cut him off. Footsteps. Multiple people moving with purpose. Marcus' radio crackled. Boss, we've got company. 4 vehicles, armed men. They're surrounding the cabin. Preston's face went cold. Romano found us. How? I demanded. How did they know we'd be here? The property search. They must have the same resources we do. Must have been monitoring for any inquiries about your father's holdings. He pulled out a gun. I hadn't known he was carrying. Marcus, exit routes. Back door to the lake, but they'll have it covered. Windows are a kill box. Front door is our best bet, but also the most obvious. Preston looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Genuine fear, not for himself, but for me. Stay behind me. Stay low. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understand? Preston, promise me, Penelope. I promise. A voice called out from below, echoing through the cabin. Preston Blackwood, we just want to talk. Romano, Preston breathed, then louder. You broke into private property with armed men. Not much of a conversation starter. The property belongs to no one, and you're trespassing just as much as we are. Romano's voice was oily, smooth. Come down. Let's discuss this like civilized people. No one needs to get hurt. He's lying, Marcus said flatly. The moment we show ourselves, they'll open fire. Preston considered for a moment, then made a decision. Clear's throat, give me the case. I handed it over, and he quickly removed several key documents, folding them into his jacket. The rest he set aside. What are you doing? Buying us time. He moved to the top of the stairs, called down, Romano, you want what's in this case? Come up and get it yourself. But your men stay downstairs. Just you. A pause. Then how do I know you won't shoot me the moment I appear? Because unlike you, I honor the old rules. Victor's rules. You come up alone. We talk and maybe we all walk away from this. Another pause, longer this time. Then the sound of footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate. Anthony Romano appeared at the top, hands visible, no weapons drawn. He was older than I expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that looked friendly until you saw the cold calculation in his eyes. Those eyes found me immediately. Penelope Matthews, you've caused us quite a lot of trouble, young lady. Funny, I said, finding my voice. I was thinking the same thing about you. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Spirited. I can see why Preston likes you. His gaze moved to Preston. So, you found Thomas's hiding place. I'm impressed. We've been looking for 5 years and you tried to kill an innocent woman to find it. Preston's voice could have frozen fire. That violates about a dozen of our agreements, Romano. Agreements made with Victor, not you. You're not Victor, boy. You never will be. No, I'm better. Preston held up the case. This contains everything. Every document, every account number, every piece of evidence Thomas Matthews collected, including proof of your conspiracy to recover the money and eliminate Victor's true heirs. Romano's eyes flickered. You're bluffing. Try me. Preston pulled out one of the documents. October 15th, 5 years ago, you met with Corelli and 4 others at the Grand Rose restaurant. You discussed how Victor's death created an opportunity, how the money Thomas stole could fund your own operation, let you break away from my organization. He looked up. Should I continue? I have dates, times, witnesses, enough to bury you and everyone involved. The color drained from Romano's face. If you expose us, you expose yourself. That case contains evidence of your crimes, too. True, but I'm willing to burn it all down if that's what it takes. The question is, are you a standoff? 2 dangerous men, each holding the other's destruction, trying to decide who would blink first. I stepped forward before I could stop myself, or we could try something different. Both men looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Different? Romano asked. You want the money? Preston wants stability in his organization. I want justice for what you did to me. I took a breath, studying myself. So, here's my offer. The money in those accounts. It's mine legally. My father set up trust that passed to me upon his death. I can access it, distribute it, or destroy it. Your call, Penelope, Preston started, but I held up a hand. You and your people retire completely. You leave Chicago. You sever all ties to organized crime. And you never speak of this again. In exchange, I'll split the money. Half goes to a foundation that does actual good. The other half is divided between you and your conspirators. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of your lives, but not enough to fund a new criminal empire. Romano stared at me. And the evidence stays with Preston. Insurance that you'll keep your word. If you come after any of us, if you violate the terms, he releases everything. You spend your remaining years in federal prison. You're serious? Completely. I crossed my arms despite the pull in my healing wound. You can have some money in your freedom or you can have nothing in your death. Because make no mistake, Mr. Romano, if you don't accept this deal, Preston will kill you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, and you'll deserve it. Preston's hand found my back, a gesture of support and pride. You heard the lady. Romano looked between us, calculating, considering. Finally, he nodded slowly. Half the money, we retire. The evidence stays buried unless we break the terms. One more thing, I added. You tell me why. Why now? After 5 years, what changed? Romano sighed, suddenly looking every bit his age. Medical bills, cancer. I have maybe 2 years left, and I wanted to leave something for my family. The others, they had their own reasons. Debts, problems, the weight of serving a new king when we'd been princes under the old one. He met my eyes. It wasn't personal, Miss Matthews. It was just business. You tried to kill me for business. Yes, and I'm sorry for that if it matters. You seem like a good person, clears throat, better than any of us deserve. It didn't make what he'd done acceptable. Didn't wash away the trauma or the pain, but it was something, an acknowledgement at least, of the cost of their choices. Get out, Preston said quietly. Take your people and go. I'll contact you within 48 hours with the details of the agreement. Break any part of it, and your family reads about your crimes in the newspapers. Are we clear, Crystal? Romano moved toward the stairs, then paused. For what it's worth, Blackwood, she's good for you. First time I've seen you show mercy in 5 years. Maybe there's hope for your soul yet. He disappeared down the stairs. Moments later, we heard vehicles starting, driving away into the night. Silence settled over the cabin. That was incredibly stupid, Preston said finally. And incredibly brave and probably the best possible outcome. I sagged against him, adrenaline draining away, leaving only exhaustion. Did we just negotiate with criminals? Yes. And you did it better than most of my lawyers. His arm came around me, supporting me. Come on, let's get you back to Chicago. We have a foundation to establish and an empire to consider dismantling. Dismantling? Romano was right. You are good for me. Making me question choices I've never questioned before. He helped me down the stairs. Dangerous thing. Hope. Is that what this is? Hope. Maybe. Or maybe just the recognition that there might be better ways to live than the ones I've chosen. We left the cabin together, carrying my father's legacy and the possibility of something different, something better. The evidence was secured. The deal was struck. And for the first time since that night in the parking garage, I felt like I could breathe. The foundation came together faster than I expected. Preston had people who specialized in making illegal money legal, in creating legitimate structures from illegitimate sources. Within 3 weeks, the Penelope Matthews Foundation for Community Health was established with an initial endowment of $5 million. Half of my father's stolen fortune, now transformed into something that might actually help people. The other $5 million was divided among Romano and his 5 conspirators, paid out through intermediaries and offshore accounts that couldn't be traced back to Preston or me. Within days of receiving their payouts, all 6 men disappeared from Chicago. Clear's throat, retired, relocated, removed from the game they'd played for so many years. Preston kept the evidence locked in a vault that only he could access. Insurance as promised, a sword hanging over their heads that would fall if they ever broke their word. I should have felt victorious. Should have felt like I'd won something. Instead, I just felt tired. My wound had healed enough that I could return to work, could resume the life I'd built before everything changed. The hospital welcomed me back with open arms. My supervisor expressing relief that I'd recovered from my mugging so well. No one asked too many questions. No one noticed that I'd spent nearly a month in a crime lord's penthouse. But I couldn't go back to my apartment. Too many memories of violation, of strangers tearing through my life. Preston offered to have it cleaned, restored, made secure. Instead, I asked him to help me find a new place, something small and simple and completely disconnected from everything that had happened. He found me a studio in Lakeview with a doorman and security cameras and locks that would have made Fort Knox jealous. Helped me move my few remaining belongings, arranged for new furniture, stood in the doorway, looking uncertain in a way I'd never seen him look before. You'll be safe here, he said. I know. If you need anything, I have your number. An awkward pause. We'd spent nearly a month living in close quarters, our lives intertwined by necessity and danger. Now that the danger had passed, we didn't quite know how to be around each other. I should go, Preston said finally. Yeah. But neither of us moved. Penelope. He stopped, shook his head. Never mind. What? Nothing. It's not. It wouldn't be appropriate. I stepped closer, studying his face. This man who commanded fear and respect, who'd built an empire through violence and will, looked almost vulnerable. Preston Blackwood worried about appropriate behavior. That's new. You make me want to be different. The confession came out quiet, almost reluctant. Better. You make me question things I've never questioned. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. All I know is that for the first time in 15 years, I'm considering whether this life is really worth living. Whether power and fear and control are actually what I want or just what I've convinced myself I need. I reached up, touching his face, feeling the scar along his jawline. And what do you want? Something I can't have. He caught my hand, pressed a kiss to my palm. Something I don't deserve. Let me be the judge of that. The kiss happened slowly, carefully, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. His lips were soft despite the hard edges everywhere else. His hands gentle as they cooped my face. I tasted uncertainty and hope and the possibility of something I'd never expected to find. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "This is a terrible idea," he whispered. "Probably. You deserve someone clean, someone good, someone who hasn't done the things I've done." "Maybe, but you're the one standing in my doorway looking at me like I'm something precious." I smiled slightly. "And I've seen enough of life to know that good and clean aren't always the same thing. You've done terrible things, Preston. I won't pretend otherwise. But you've also protected me, honored your word, and showed me mercy when you could have chosen violence. That counts for something. Does it count enough? I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out." We stood there for a long moment, the future uncertain, but possible. Then Preston stepped back, creating distance that felt both necessary and painful. "I need to handle something first," he said. "A loose end that's been bothering me." "What kind of loose end?" "The kind that determines what kind of man I'm going to be." He kissed me once more, quick and gentle. "I'll call you." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my new apartment with the ghost of his touch and the promise of something that felt dangerously like hope. Over the next 2 weeks, I rebuilt my routine. Morning shifts at the hospital, afternoons spent planning the foundation's first initiatives. We'd start with a free clinic on the south side, offering basic healthcare to people who couldn't afford it otherwise. Then maybe expand to other neighborhoods, other services, turn blood money into healing. Preston called every few days, brief conversations that felt both too short and too long. He was busy, he said, working on something important. But he never gave details, never explained what he was doing. I tried not to worry, tried not to imagine all the terrible possibilities. Then 3 weeks after Romano's disappearance, Preston showed up at my apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning. I opened the door to find him standing there in a suit that had seen better days, a split lip and blood on his knuckles that probably wasn't his. But his eyes were clear, focused, and somehow lighter than I'd ever seen them. "Did I wake you?" he asked. "Obviously." I pulled him inside, locking the door behind him. "What happened?" "I dismantled my organization." Clear's throat, he said it so simply, like he was discussing the weather. "Shut down the illegal operations, sold off the legitimate fronts, paid off everyone who needed paying off. It took 3 weeks of negotiation, threats, and a few actual fights. But it's done." I stared at him. "You what?" I walked away from all of it. The empire, the power, the fear. He moved to my tiny kitchen, running water to wash the blood from his hands. I kept enough money to live comfortably, set up trusts for the families of men who'd worked for me, made sure no one would starve because I decided to grow a conscience. But the rest gone, distributed to rivals, sold to competitors, dissolved into nothing. "Preston, that was your entire life." "No, that was the life I built because I didn't know there were other options." He dried his hands, turned to face me. "You showed me other options, showed me that power isn't the only thing worth having, that mercy isn't weakness, that maybe, just maybe, I could be someone different. What will you do now?" "I don't know." Clear's throat, figure out who Preston Blackwood is when he's not trying to be Victor Kane's successor. Maybe go to school, get a legitimate degree in something. Maybe travel, maybe just exist for a while without always looking over my shoulder. He smiled slightly. "Maybe spend time with a remarkable nurse who makes me want to be better." That's a lot of may. Yes, but they're possible maybe now. Before they weren't even that. I crossed the small space between us, taking his hands in mine, despite the split knuckles. "This is real." "You're really done with that life?" "As real as I can make it. There will be consequences. There are always consequences when you break promises to dangerous people. But I've prepared for that. Protected the people I care about. Made sure that if anyone comes after me, it's only me they can touch, including me. Especially you." His hands tightened on mine. "You're untouchable now, Penelope. Multiple layers of security, legal protections, money, and accounts that can't be traced. Even if someone wanted to hurt you to get to me, they couldn't reach you. Unless I choose to be reachable." "Unless you choose to be reachable," he agreed quietly. I studied his face. This man who'd given up everything for the possibility of something different. He looked exhausted, battered, and somehow free in a way I'd never seen before. "Stay," I said. "What? Tonight?" "Stay here tonight. Not because you need to protect me. Not because there's danger. Just because I don't want you to leave." Something shifted in his expression. That vulnerability returning. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm sure that I want to find out what comes next. And I think you do, too." We fell asleep on my couch, too tired for anything but closeness, too wired for actual rest. His arms around me, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong. When morning came, we'd face whatever consequences his choices had created. But for now, in the quiet hours before dawn, we just existed together. Two people trying to build something good from the wreckage of their pasts. The phone call came at 6 a.m., jolting us both awake. Preston answered without looking at the screen. Yes. I couldn't hear the other side, but I watched Preston's face change. Shock, then anger, then something like resignation. When? A pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Yes, she's with me. We'll both come. He hung up, rubbed his face. That was Marcus. I thought you disbanded your organization. I did, but Marcus wasn't just an employee. He's a friend. One of the few real ones I have. Preston stood, offering me his hand. Someone broke into the vault. The evidence is gone. Clear's throat, my blood ran cold. Romano, maybe. Or someone else who knows what that documentation means. Either way, we need to figure out what happened before whoever took it decides to use it. Use it how? To destroy what's left of my organization. To blackmail people who paid me for protection. To hurt everyone whose name appears in those documents. He pulled me to my feet, including yours. We dressed quickly, Preston borrowing clothes that didn't quite fit. Me pulling on scrubs from my hospital bag. Within 15 minutes, we were in a car heading back toward Preston's penthouse toward whatever crisis awaited. Marcus met us at the door, looking grim. Clean entry, professional work. They knew exactly where the vault was, had the access codes, left no trace except the missing evidence. Inside job, Preston asked. Has to be. Only 5 people knew that vault's location and access codes. You, me, and 3 others. All people we've trusted for years. Who else knew about the evidence? I asked. Romano and his people. But they're scattered and none of them had access to this building. Marcus led us to the office where the vault stood open, empty. This wasn't them. Preston stared at the empty space, jaw tight. Then we have a traitor or someone with a very good reason to want that information, I said slowly. What if it's not about destroying your organization? What if it's about something else? Something in those documents that we missed. Both men looked at me. Your father was meticulous, Preston said. He documented everything. If there's something else in there, something beyond what we saw, then we need to figure out what before whoever has it now uses it against us. I pulled out my phone. The letters, my father's letters to me. I never read them all. What if there are clues there? They were taken from your apartment weeks ago. The physical letters were, but Romano said they were looking for something else. Remember? What if my father sent copies somewhere? A backup plan like everything else he did. Preston considered, where would he send copies? I don't know, but there's one person who might. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, praying it still worked. It rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. Hello, Aunt Marie. It's Penelope. Penny? My father's sister sounded shocked. Oh my God, I heard about your attack. Are you alright? I'm fine, but I need to ask you something about Dad. Did he ever send you anything? Packages, letters, files? Well, yes. About 6 months before he died, he sent me a box. Said to keep it safe, not to open it unless something happened to him. But honey, I gave that box to the police after he died. Didn't they tell you? My heart sank. The police? Detective Hammond, I think his name was. He came asking questions about your father's business dealings. Said the box might contain evidence. I thought I was helping. Preston's eyes met mine, understanding dawning. Hammond, he mouthed. Detective Robert Hammond, one of dozens of police officers on Victor Kane's payroll. One of the names in my father's documentation. A man who'd been feeding information to criminals for over a decade. Aunt Marie, did you keep a record of what was in the box? No, but wait, let me check something. Rustling on the other end. Your father sent me a letter with the box. I kept it separate. Let me read it to you. She did. And my father's voice echoed across the years one more time. Instructions for his sister, safety measures, and a list, a complete inventory of everything in the box, including copies of all his letters to me, including one document he'd labeled The Real Truth. Do you know what that means? Aunt Marie asked. No, but I'm going to find out. I thanked her, hung up, turned to Preston. Hammond has had copies of everything for 5 years. He's probably been using bits and pieces to blackmail people, build his own power base, and now he has the originals, too, which means he's about to make a play, Marcus said. Use it all at once to tear down everyone his documentation implicates. Including me, Preston said quietly. Including all of Victor's old organization. He's going to burn it all down. Then we stop him. I stood, feeling that same determination that had carried me through nursing school, through long shifts and impossible choices. We find Hammond. We get the evidence back and we end this. Preston looked at me, something like pride in his eyes. You don't have to do this. You're out. You're safe. You could walk away. I could, but I won't. I took his hand. You gave up everything for the chance to be someone different. I'm not abandoning you now. We see this through together. Together, he agreed. Marcus cleared his throat. Hate to interrupt the moment, but we need to move. If Hammond is making a play, he won't wait. He'll release that information soon, probably to the press. Maximum damage, maximum chaos. Then we need to find him first. Preston pulled out his phone making calls. I still have some friends. People who owe me favors. People who might know where a dirty cop would go if he wanted to cause maximum damage while staying safe. The hunt was on. 3 hours of phone calls, tracking, old connections, and newer favors. Finally, a lead. Hammond had been seen at a storage facility on the outskirts of the city, a place where he'd rented a unit under a false name where evidence could be stored away from prying eyes. We arrived as the sun was setting, the storage facility half empty and poorly lit. Marcus stayed with the car, watching for trouble, while Preston and I approached the unit Hammond had rented. The door was unlocked. Inside, we found exactly what we feared. Boxes of documents, drives full of data, years of evidence carefully catalogued and organized. And in the center of it all, Detective Robert Hammond himself. He looked up as we entered, a smile playing at his lips. Preston Blackwood. I wondered when you'd figure it out. It's over, Hammond. Give us the evidence and walk away. You're still alive, still free. Take the win. Walk away from the opportunity of a lifetime. I don't think so. Hammond gestured to the documents around him. Clears throat. Do you know what I have here? The complete history of Chicago's underworld. Names, dates, crimes, payments. I can bring down mayors, judges, business leaders. I can reshape the entire city in my image. You destroy countless lives for power. Isn't that what you did? What Victor did? What every person in these documents did? Hammond's smile widened. I'm just playing by the rules you all established. We're trying to change those rules, I said, stepping forward. Preston walked away from his organization. Romano and the others retired. People are trying to be better. Don't destroy that chance. How noble. Hammond pulled out a gun, casual and confident. But I'm afraid I can't allow that. You see, I've spent 5 years building this case, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. And that moment is now. Preston moved slightly in front of me, protective even now. You shoot me, you lose everything. My death triggers releases. Evidence of your corruption sent to federal authorities, media outlets, everyone. You'll be in prison before my body's cold. Bluffing? Try me. They stared at each other. Two men who'd operated in shadows, now facing each other in dim fluorescent light. Clear's throat, the gun didn't waver. I took a breath, made a choice. You have my father's letter, the one labeled the real truth. What does it say? Hammond's eyes flickered to me. You don't know. I never read it, but I'm guessing it's important. Important? Hammond laughed. It's explosive. Your father didn't just document crimes. He documented the reason for them. The purpose behind Victor Kane's empire. And it's not what you think. Tell me. Victor Kane was FBI. The words dropped like a bomb deep undercover for 20 years. Everything he built, every criminal connection was part of an operation to infiltrate and eventually dismantle organized crime from the inside. Your father discovered it by accident, kept quiet because he was loyal. But he wrote it all down. Left evidence of the biggest undercover operation in federal history. Silence. Preston had gone completely still beside me. That's impossible, he said finally. I knew Victor. He raised me. He was playing a role, a very good one. Hammond pulled out a letter, my father's handwriting addressed to me. Read it yourself. Preston took it with shaking hands. I moved closer, reading over his shoulder. My father's final confession. How he discovered Victor's true identity. How Victor had trusted him with the secret, used him to maintain the fiction. How everything Preston had been taught was a lie designed to create the perfect criminal empire, one controlled by the FBI all along. When Victor died, the operation died with him. Hammond continued, the FBI tried to continue it, but without Victor, everything fell apart. Preston, you inherited an empire that was supposed to be dismantled. Instead, you made it real. You turned a fiction into reality. Preston's face had gone pale. Everything I am is based on a lie. Hammond finished. And now I'm going to expose it all. The FBI's corruption, your crimes, the deaths of everyone who trusted Victor. It's the story of the century. And you'll destroy countless lives in the process, I said. Collateral damage. Or, Preston said quietly, his voice strange and hollow. We give you something better. Hammond raised an eyebrow. Better than this. A ending to the story. Victor Kane's undercover operation succeeded. It destroyed the old organizations, replaced them with something new. And now 5 years after his death, his final protege walks away, dismantling everything Victor built because he finally understood the truth. Preston looked at Hammond. You get your story, your redemption as the detective who finally brought the truth to light. And in exchange, you don't release the evidence that destroys hundreds of innocent people caught up in Victor's web. You'd confess publicly. I'd tell the truth about Victor, about myself, about everything. Give interviews, cooperate with investigations, face whatever legal consequences come. But the raw evidence, the names and details, those stay sealed. You get the narrative. I take the fall. Everyone else gets a chance to walk away. Hammond considered, lowering the gun slightly. Why would you do that? Preston glanced at me, and I saw the answer in his eyes. Because he'd finally found something worth sacrificing for. Because he wanted to be better, even if being better meant facing punishment for everything he'd done. Because it's the right thing to do, Preston said simply. And because someone recently taught me that right things are worth doing even when they're hard. The press conference happened 3 days later in a federal building downtown. Preston sat at a table with FBI representatives on one side and federal prosecutors on the other while I watched from the back of the room along with dozens of reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. He looked different. Not the crime lord I'd met in a hospital room. Not the dangerous man who protected me from shadows, just a person, tired and determined, and finally free of pretense. My name is Preston Blackwood, he began, and the room fell silent. For the past 15 years, I've been the head of one of Chicago's largest criminal organizations. I've committed crimes. I've hurt people. I've built power through fear and violence. And I'm here today to tell you why. He told them everything about Victor Kane's undercover operation. About being recruited as a teenager shaped into the perfect successor. Taught to value loyalty and strength above all else. About discovering the truth only after Victor's death, realizing too late that his entire life had been orchestrated as part of a federal investigation. Clear's throat. When I learned what Victor had been, I had a choice. Preston continued. I could continue the lie, keep building an empire that was supposed to be dismantled, or I could do what Victor would have wanted, what he spent 20 years working toward. I could end it. He detailed the dismantling of his organization, the negotiations, the payoffs, the careful distribution of power to ensure no violent vacuum opened up. Hammond sat in the front row taking notes, looking vindicated and almost sympathetic. I can't undo the harm I've caused, Preston said quietly. I can't bring back the people who died because of my choices, but I can face the consequences. I can tell the truth, and I can spend whatever time I have left trying to balance the scales. The questions came rapid fire after that. What crimes specifically? What violence? Who else was involved? Preston answered what he could, deflected when the answers would implicate others, accepted responsibility for everything that was solely his doing. It took 4 hours. By the end, he'd confessed to enough crimes to put him away for decades. But he'd also protected everyone else. The low-level employees, the reformed criminals, the people who'd been caught in Victor's web through no choice of their own. When it finally ended, federal marshals approached to take him into custody. He'd negotiated the terms in advance, no handcuffs in public, no Peru walk for the cameras, just a quiet walk out the back entrance while the press scrambled to file their stories. I was waiting by that back entrance. You came? He said surprised. Of course I came. I took his hand, ignoring the marshals who shifted uncomfortably. Did you think I'd abandon you because you did the right thing? I'm going to prison, Penelope. For a long time, years, probably decades if the prosecutors get their way. Then I guess I'll become very familiar with visiting hours. I squeezed his hand. You gave up everything for the chance to be someone different. I'm not letting you face that alone. You deserve better. I deserve what I choose. And I choose this. I choose you. I glanced at the marshals. Can I have 1 minute? They stepped back, giving us space. I love you, I said simply. I probably shouldn't. It's probably too soon, too complicated, too many reasons why this is a terrible idea, but I love you anyway. Preston's eyes widened, then softened. I love you, too. Have since the moment you walked into my office and demanded to know why I was keeping you prisoner. Really? That's the moment you were fierce and terrified and completely unwilling to back down. It was magnificent. He smiled sad and genuine. I'm sorry I can't give you the life you deserve. No, you're giving me something better. A chance to build something meaningful from all this chaos. The foundation, the clinics, the opportunity to help people. That's because of you. Because you chose to change. Because of you, he corrected. You showed me there were other options. The marshal stepped forward again. Time was up. Preston kissed me once, gentle and desperate and full of unspoken promises. Then he pulled away, nodded to the marshals, and walked toward the vehicle that would take him to his new reality. I watched until he disappeared from sight, then turned to find Hammond standing behind me. That was quite a performance, the detective said. It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. Maybe. Hammond pulled out an envelope. Your father's final letter. The original. I kept it separate from everything else. I took it surprised. Why are you giving this to me? Because reading it changed my mind about a lot of things. Your father was a criminal, but he was also a man trying to do right by his daughter. Preston is a criminal. But he's also a man trying to change. Maybe there's hope for all of us. Hammond turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm going to recommend leniency in Preston's sentencing. A man who confesses everything, who cooperates fully, who actively works to repair the harm he's caused. That's rare in my experience. It should count for something. Thank you. He nodded and left. I stood alone in that hallway, holding my father's final words, surrounded by the echoes of press conferences and confessions. I opened the letter right there, reading my father's last message to me. Penny, if you're reading this, you know the truth about Victor. I'm sorry I never told you while I was alive. Keeping that secret was the hardest thing I ever did. Victor asked me once why I didn't leave the life. I had enough money, enough information to disappear. But I told him it was because of you. Because I wanted to leave you something good, something clean. I thought if I could help him complete his operation, if I could help bring down the old criminal empires, then maybe my life would have meant something. I failed. I got greedy and scared and stupid. But Victor's work didn't fail. And now you have the chance to complete what we started. Use the money for good. Use the foundation to help people. Show the world that something beautiful can grow from ashes. I won't be there to see it, but I'll be proud wherever I am. Love always, Dad. I folded the letter fully, tucking it away. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call. Sarah, it's Penelope. I need to talk to you about expanding the foundation. I'm thinking we start with 3 clinics instead of 1. If you're interested in being medical director, the position is yours. 6 months later, the first clinic opened its doors. We'd renovated an old building on the south side, turning it into a bright, welcoming space where anyone could receive care regardless of ability to pay. Sarah ran it with efficiency and compassion, hiring a staff of nurses and doctors who believed in the mission. I worked there 2 days a week, spending the rest of my time at the hospital and managing the foundation's expansion. We'd already identified locations for 2 more clinics. By year's end, we'd have 5 operating across Chicago's most underserved neighborhoods. Preston called every Sunday from federal prison where he was serving a 15-year sentence, reduced from 25 because of his cooperation and testimony. We talked about everything and nothing, the foundation's progress, his attempts to get his GED, then maybe a college degree, the strange peace he'd found in accepting responsibility for his choices. I saw the news, he said one Sunday. The 3rd clinic opened yesterday. We had over 200 people show up on the first day. Sarah's already talking about expanding hours to handle the demand. Your father would be proud. I think he'd be amazed and probably confused about how his daughter fell in love with a man currently in federal prison. Preston laughed. That is admittedly an unusual situation. I'm an unusual person. Yes, you are. It's one of the many things I love about you. We talked for the full allotted time, then said goodbye until next week. I hung up, feeling both satisfied and melancholy. 15 years was a long time. He'd be in his 50s when he got out, assuming good behavior didn't reduce the sentence further. But Hammond had been right. Preston's cooperation had been invaluable. He'd helped dismantle 3 major criminal networks, provided testimony that put dozens of corrupt officials behind bars, and worked with federal authorities to identify and protect victims of organized crime. The prosecutors had recommended further sentence reductions, possibly parole in as little as 7 years. 7 years, still a long time, but bearable, survivable. I walked home from the clinic as the sun set over Chicago. This city we'd both tried to change in our own ways. My apartment was no longer the sterile safe house Preston had found me, clear as throat, but a real home filled with books and plants and photos of the people I'd helped. On my desk sat framed pictures. My mother, young and healthy, my father holding a younger me who still trusted him. Preston on the day of his confession looking free despite the chains ahead of him. And beside those pictures, architectural plans for Clinic Number 4, a women's health center specializing in prenatal care and maternal support. We'd break ground next month. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, who'd reinvented himself as the foundation's head of security. Heads up, media asking about your relationship with PB. Want me to shut it down? Let them ask, I replied. We have nothing to hide. And we didn't. Preston had confessed everything. I'd been questioned extensively, cleared of any wrongdoing, and identified as a victim rather than an accomplice. Our relationship was unusual, certainly, but it was also real, built on honesty and shared determination to create something good from tragedy. Another text. This one from an unknown number. Miss Matthews, this is Anthony Romano. I wanted you to know that I've started volunteering at a cancer support center, using my remaining time to help others like me. You and Preston inspired that. Thank you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then replied. Thank you for telling me. I hope you find peace. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Hammond standing there looking uncomfortable. Detective, is something wrong? No, actually, I came to give you something. He held out a file. Copies of the evidence your father gathered. I kept them separate from what went to prosecutors. Thought you might want them, clears throat, for the foundation or for yourself. Proof of where you came from, maybe? I took the file, surprised. Why? Because your father spent 5 years gathering this information, and you spent months transforming it into something positive. Clears throat, that story deserves to be preserved, even if most of it stays private. He shifted his weight. And because I was wrong about a lot of things, about you, about Preston, about whether people can really change, I'd like to make that right if I can. You recommended leniency in his sentencing. That's making it right. It's a start. Hammond nodded awkwardly. Anyway, I won't take up more of your time. Clears throat, take care, Miss Matthews. He left and I carried the file to my desk, setting it beside the architectural plans and family photos, evidence of the past, plans for the future, all mixed together in the strange tapestry my life had become. That night, I dreamed of my father. He was young, healthy, standing in the cabin by the lake. He smiled at me, proud, and sad, and somehow at peace. You did good, Penny, he said. Better than I ever managed. I'm trying, I told him. Every day I'm trying to balance the scales. The scales will never fully balance, but that's not the point. The point is trying. The point is being better today than you were yesterday. You understand that now? I woke before dawn. The dream fading but the message lingering. Yes, I understood. Preston understood, too. Was living it every day in his small cell. Cooperating with authorities, studying for degrees, slowly transforming himself into someone new. We were both works in progress, both trying to create good from the wreckage we'd inherited and the choices we'd made. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean, but it was real and honest and somehow beautiful in its imperfection. 7 years felt both impossibly long and strangely short. Time to build more clinics. Time to help more people. Time to prove that redemption wasn't just a fantasy, but something that could be earned through consistent, patient effort. My phone buzzed again. A calendar reminder. Sunday call with Preston. I smiled and started making coffee. We had a lot to talk about. Clinic 4's progress, his latest coursework, the possibility of conjugal visits if his behavior continued to earn privileges. Plans for a future neither of us had expected, but both of us were determined to build. The sun rose over Chicago, painting the city in shades of golden rose. Somewhere out there, people were waking up with pain and fear and uncertainty. And in 5 locations across the city, clinics bearing my name would open their doors, offering help without judgment, care without questions, healing built on money that had once only caused harm. My father's curse had become my purpose. Preston's empire had become a foundation for good. And somehow, through all the darkness and violence and choices we couldn't undo, we'd found something worth fighting for. Each other, the possibility of change, the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could leave the world better than we found it. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined 6 months ago when I'd walked to my car through a dark parking garage. But it was the ending I'd chosen and, clear's throat, the beginning of something new. And that I decided as I settled in to wait for Preston's call was more than